So further emphasizing what a global business Hollywood has become, it is a French magazine which has given us two major scoops when it comes to the upcoming Wonder Woman movie. We can really begin to see the story take shape, and it sounds excellent. But the big takeaway from this, according to a number of people, was that Ares, the god of war, would be the main antagonist in this first film, to which I say, not so fast. But I do think that the DCEU potentially has major plans for the Wonder Woman arch villain. In some ways, her Joker, I think Ares and also Cheetah are like her two biggest villains. She has a couple of other ones that are noteworthy, or at least known to the general public. I wouldn't go go that far actually. I think Wonder Woman isn't quite as popular as her the other two members of the DC Trinity, but still, Ares, as you're about to see, is a big one. But what this video is going to do is it's going to share my theories for this upcoming film and how Ares factors in, and then also how he might be factoring into the DCEU at large based on his comic book history. And I think it sounds actually excellent. So there are chapter times down below if you want to jump around. But what I want to start with is my reasoning for why he isn't going to be the main antagonist in the upcoming Wonder Woman movie. Because I got one word for you. Darkseid, right? They teased him big time in Batman v Superman. They had the Omega symbol, they had the parademons, but all we got was Steppenwolf, right? And not even Steppenwolf. We got like Steppenwolf via Skype, Kryptonian Skype. But I think that this shows that the DCEU, has a precedent of having major villains pulling the strings from afar to be introduced in a later film. And this makes sense from a business perspective as well, because let the films do well and then you can get a bigger caliber actor, right? That kind of backfired a little bit with BVS, but if Wonder Woman does really well, I imagine they can get maybe a pretty big name actor to sign on for what I think is going to be potentially a very substantial role in the DCEU. So who will Wonder Woman fight in this movie? Well, I think she's going to fight Danny Houston, who I think a number of you correctly have guessed is the Duke of Deception. And then also there's Dr. Poison. These are agents of Ares. They are putting his plans in motion, putting the pieces in position. Now, Ares could always show up at the end of the movie in like a boss level fight, right? And as a CGI construct, perhaps. But I don't see this Wonder Woman movie having that kind of budget. And I also think it would be a waste of the character, potentially, because if this Wonder Woman movie is like the best DCEU movie to date and is seen as the one that saves it all, I think that a lot of people will be lining up, or at least it'll be easier to convince them to join this narrative, right? The Wonder Woman narrative. The other reason I think that he can't show up is because, as we now know as well from the Entertainment Weekly photo, is that Wonder Woman wields the God Killer sword. And so if she meets Ares, how is she not going to kill him, right? I think that, it's like the laws of storytelling. Once you introduce it, you got to use it. It's like when you put a gun on the mantle, it has to go off by the end of the third act. So anyway, I think that that's another reasoning. Although, interestingly, on a side note, the God Killer sword in the comics is forged by Hephaestus. It'll be interesting to see if he forges all of Wonder Woman's weapons. But it's for Deathstroke. He makes it for Deathstroke for a contract that Hephaestus takes out, and he's like, you're going to need this. And also, it can shapeshift into different weapons in the comics, but that seems a little bit expensive for a movie. And I think completely unnecessary. But for once, at least, Wonder Woman got to take something from a male character instead of a male character taking something from her. Now, David Thewlis is also in the cast here. Maybe he'll do the voice of Ares. Maybe, I'm not sure. I think they could do better, with all due respect to David Thewlis fans. You're a limited bunch, but perhaps a potent one, a loyal one. I think they could do better than casting him. Maybe he'll perhaps play someone in the British military that Steve Trevor's working with, etc. We're going to get to Steve Trevor in just a moment. All right. So anyway, let's get actually into the scoops from the French magazine. All right. So these were translated for us. So Chris Pine says, I play a pilot who works for the Allies. Includes of course England. And spies on the Germans without their knowledge. My character steals a notebook filled with scientific formulas in an Ottoman base. That's Eastern Europe on the edge of the Middle East. I believe, now today would be called Turkey, that area. He steals a plane, but is shot down in the open sea. It begins to come together. You know the sequence in the trailers that we've seen when Steve Trevor is quickly walking towards a plane and then, takes off and opens fire down below and then everything explodes behind him? I believe that must be the opening action sequence of the movie. Good job, Patty Jenkins, knowing to put an action sequence up front. And then that's interesting that would lead to him crash landing on the Themyscira. But then even more than that, we find out that behind these scientific formulas, there is a deadly gas, we saw that in the trailers, that could annihilate humanity. It turns out that it might interest Ares, the god of war. He is jealous of humanity, which is a creation of his father, the deceased Zeus. The Amazons and Zeus rebelled against Ares, and Zeus died from the hand of his son. So this doesn't sound to me like main antagonist, right? It sounds like string puller from, behind the scenes to be later revealed, whose name is to be whispered, probably revealed at the end of the film. They're like, oh, Ares. So there are a couple of changes here that I think are interesting. The big one, of course, being that he is jealous of humanity, and that's perhaps why he wants to use this deadly gas. In the comics, Ares gets power from the conflict of man because he's the god of war, so he does it to, boost his power levels, and also because he likes it. So that's a pretty big change. And I think it's very interesting that Zeus is deceased, which we will also talk about. But this is a really good spine. It's a good foundation for the story. It's a good setup, as I said in my notes. It's very solid. It's very simple. It's fantastic to build on. And I think it's interesting that even though Zack Snyder helped come up with this story with Alan Heinberg, who was a TV writer, but also a DC Comics writer, has actually written Wonder Woman comics. I think that it's interesting that the script itself was written by Heinberg and also Jeff Johns. So this is the first time we're going to have people who come from the world of DC Comics writing the script. So they're going to have more respect for the source material, more and a better knowledge of it. Let's use these ideas that have worked in the comics. So I think that's very exciting and might be why perhaps Wonder Woman is the first DCEU movie that truly works across the board. All right, so anyway, let's extrapolate. So Ares was the very first foe of Wonder Woman. And the idea, the story there was that Aphrodite led the tide against him. There's war versus love, make love, not war, right? And she created the Amazons as kind of an answer to the men who followed Ares, right? So that's very interesting. But I also think it's interesting, considering the S&M origins of Wonder Woman, that Aphrodite would be their patron saint, whereas today, I think you'd probably go with Athena. But fascinating. Or maybe, I guess, Zeus, but Zeus is kind of the patron god of everyone because he's the top guy, or was. So then, with the New 52, though, Ares has, of course, evolved as with each new reincarnation of the DC Comics universe. So in the New 52, they did a really good job. This comic started off fabulously before losing its way. Brian Azzarello and Cliff Chiang was the artist there. So anyway, Zeus was also deceased at the beginning of that run. So it's interesting to see that mimicked here. And that created a competition amongst the other gods, the Greco-Roman gods, for the throne of Olympus. And during that, it's very complicated, but basically during that competition to take over for Zeus, Ares, who had a very cool design, by the way, a very cool modern design, who trained Wonder Woman, until they had a disagreement over whether or not she would be willing to kill. He's killed by Firstborn. Again, as I said, it's complicated. But Wonder Woman takes over as the goddess of war, and she had to fight that darkness. So I see a potential storyline for Gal Gadot down the line. I think she would do a great job with it. By the way, I really liked Keeping Up with the Joneses, but I was a little harsh on Gal Gadot in my review of that. I saw it again last night because I recommended it to some friends, and I was like, I'll watch it again with you. And her performance, I think, grows on you. I think she's going to do a great job. So anyway, I like that possible storyline down the road for Wonder Woman, but also the New 52 is a great example of how to put gods, Greco-Roman gods, into the DCEU and make it work. Because, are you going to have this big CGI Greco-Roman god come marching in, or are you going to have something a little more subtle, a little more modern? I guess I could go either way, but I'm kind of hoping for the more subtle modern one. Also, they in this run, they contrasted the Greco-Roman gods with the new gods, who, of course, are the enemies of Darkseid on Apocalypse. And, of course, Darkseid is coming with the Justice League movies. Well, again, he might not show up for the first Justice League movie. It might just be Steppenwolf. But still, there's very strong potential, I think, for an Ares Darkseid team up. So why kill him in the first Wonder Woman movie? I think that's great. Also, with the New Gods storyline, Orion was a potential love interest. Well, they had like a weird flirtation going on, and I thought he really was a good fit with Diana. So then, with the recent Rebirth, if you're looking for a Wonder Woman comic to read, go check out Rebirth. It's running on 2 lines. It's like the Wonder Woman Year 1, and then also a modern story, and it's really well written. Greg Rucka, one of the greatest Wonder Woman story writers of all time. But anyway, what he's done is that he has had Ares come back, but what it's going on, it's continuing with a more modern depiction of the god. He is behind the Sear Group, which is a terrorist cell, and it's actually a madness that we're discovering that spreads amongst innocent people and turns them into terrorists. They have the urge to kill and destroy by any means possible. So I think that would be a great way to bring, when we have Wonder Woman go back into the current timeline after this first movie, that would be a great way for Ares to still be around, right? And also for the other characters to deal with it. And of course, with a more modern terrorist context. I also have to mention that in the comics, sometimes Ares has had a base of operations on Mars, because Mars, the planet Mars, because Mars is the Roman name for Ares. They're Greco-Roman gods, and for those of you who are familiar with Greek mythology, if you are, you really are. I myself am a fan, but there are 2 sets of names depending on Greek or Roman. So I don't know if a base of operations on Mars is too far-fetched for the DCEU or irresistible. I could see it working, but I could see it really not working. So anyway, I would not expect to see Ares in the first Wonder Woman movie. I think it's a waste. I think it's unnecessary. I think they're going for a slow build, and I applaud that. But I think that you will see the reveal of Ares as someone behind the scenes, and that he will be set up for a potential major player in the DCEU at large going forward, which is quite exciting. And I think it will give Wonder Woman a bigger stake in the DCEU. I think one of the and also in just DC, I think that one of the things that's hurt her in the DC universe over the years is that while other characters cross over, you rarely see anyone dealing with Wonder Woman characters, right? So I think this would be a really exciting way, particularly with things like the Sear Group, to bring her story, have it bleed into the other characters and the other movies, which is very exciting. Also, the New Gods, I would love maybe for Wonder Woman 2, for Diana to, since we're introducing Apocalypse, the planet for Darkseid. So many of you who don't know comics are like, I think you mean Darkseid, Grace. Apocalypse is from X-Men. It's like, no, it's spelled differently. But anyway, it's also a DC planet. But if they're bringing that in, then I would love to see maybe for Wonder Woman 2, again, Diana go to, to see the New Gods and meet Orion. I think that would be fantastic. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. Will you be disappointed if Ares isn't the main antagonist? What do you think about his potential larger role in the DCEU moving forward? And do you think we'll see other Greco-Roman gods? And how do you want to see them? Do you want to see them in the traditional, the traditional garb, right? Or do you like the New 52 designs, which again, I am partial to, because they're both realistic and surreal. They're really cool. All right, so anyway, I'm excited to hear your thoughts down below. I've given you some reading material as well if you want to do a little background research, and you can check out some other videos right now.